everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of Scottish Opera podcasts. This is podcast number 5, and today I'm joined by Marion Colquhoun, who is the head of props at Scottish Opera. Hello, Marion.
Hi there. Hi.
So, first question, a kind of general question I ask most people doing these is, can you give us a bit of background to your role in the company?
So my job as head of props is that I am responsible pretty much for most things you see on the stage. Props is short for properties, and probably out of all the departments, ours is the kind of most flexible and versatile in what we're asked to do. So we could be asked for a giant sculpture, we could be asked for some broken bones, we could just be asked for some nice furniture, we could be asked for a knife that gives a fake blood effect.
Yeah.
So I guess it's quite difficult to pin our department down in that pretty much everything you see on the stage, apart from the flown cloths, will have probably been sourced from our department or made in our department.
It's such an interesting role, and I think, again, one, I didn't know props meant property, so that's I'm learning all the time, but it's something that people go, oh yeah, people, there's props department, or, usually in relation to television or something like that, but probably don't have an idea of what they do or where they come from. So what's your background in terms of...
Well, I was definitely one of those people that had, when I was younger, I'd never heard of, a props mistress or master or a prop maker. I came mainly from a musical background. My father was a musician, and that's what I intended to do. But at the very last minute, going into your choosing where to study, I changed my mind and decided to study Scottish Literature and Theatre Studies, which was very academic. But through working, doing an academic degree in theatre studies, I ended up working on student shows in the Gilmer Hill Centre in Glasgow.
Wow.
It was 2000, and it was just actually as the new building had opened up and they had great facilities, so we were putting on a lot of fantastic new productions, and I knew I was never going to be somebody on stage. I'd made that decision. I'd made that I was far too shy, and nobody needed to see that. So I started to work in the stage management, and by default, in smaller theatre, stage management do the props. So I started to do prop making, and as soon as I started to make things, it became so natural to me because my mum had been somebody since we were very little. She taught us to sew, she taught us to do a lot of crafting and making with her hands. So everything came very natural to me, and I felt like this is absolutely wonderful. And off the back of that, I went to study at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama.
Yes.
But still as a stage manager, until I went in to do my very first placement in props, and they went, "You're a prop maker, you're not a stage manager." And that was it. And so I went to drama school, not knowing that was what I was going to study, but very much having a great period of enlightenment and teaching myself and learning to paint and draw. But the sculpting and making anything physically with my hands came really naturally, and I was so addicted. I just didn't want to go home at night. And
it's so lovely that this idea of this is something that you had done when you were younger becomes a job.
Yeah, and I think it was just lovely to think that those things came from my parents as well. Their skills, all kind of added up. I think when I get my father's musical background and my mum, very, great maker, who knew this job would come out of that,
Yeah, because I think I probably thought that it would have been from an arts degree.
Yeah.
First of all, where you learn to paint, you learn and you do backdrops or something like that and develop. So there's such an interesting way into it.
Well, I think also because a little bit back in the day, people weren't so aware of there's technical schools to go and study this. It just wasn't something that would appear on the syllabus. So I don't even have a standard grade in art. And now I tell and teach people who've been to art school how to make things and do things. Mm-hmm. So I always, when we have our school groups coming in, I always make it very clear, you don't have to have a qualification in something. It is just, sometimes it's about teaching yourself and grasping every opportunity you can.
And so there's an educational aspect as well. You do have schools coming in to see what is done.
So, I mean, I think I've always found that wherever I've worked, one of the nicest things is when you do have school groups or tour groups coming round, because like any other job, you have those moments where you go, oh, I'm so fed up. And there's nothing better for someone just to remind you of how lucky you are. And I think it's really important as well, especially with the way the arts is, education is going just now. It's great for people to know these jobs are there, and anyone from a working class background or every background, you can do it,
It's interesting having talking to a few people now from the company about how important the educational aspect and the kind of outreach aspect is.
Oh, it is. I mean, one of my very greatest memories from primary school, I went to a primary school in Knightswood, and it just felt like, we weren't very important, but Scottish Opera chose to, visit us when I was in primary school, and we spent weeks practicing these songs, and then they came and we put on this fantastic show. And I remember when I came here about 6 years ago, and I went talked hello to the education department, got introduced, and I told them, and right away they knew the songs, and they they pulled them out, and it was such a magical thing in my childhood, and quite inspiring, and it opens different worlds to you.
So in terms of the kind of everyday practicalities of the job, what does that entail?
So the department's responsible for all of the props. So we're responsible for the buying of the props. I'm responsible as prop supervisor. I'm head of the department, but we have prop supervisors on shows, and we have prop makers. The prop supervisor will be the person who's in charge of the overall view. So you'll go and you'll buy the props. We don't borrow props because we have to have everything for the next time they come out.
Right.
But you'll buy and source props, but you'll also be the person feeding the designer's vision to the maker. And you will be working almost as a designer yourself, making sure this maker understands what they're trying to produce. And the thing with props is it's not just about producing a beautiful piece of art. Most of the things we produce on stage, they have a really practical element to them.
Functional aspect.
Whether it's they have to do some incredible trick, like where we had our lovely magic bells, our little robotic man and the flute.
Fabulous.
I mean, that was a really technical, difficult job to do. Or it could just be we're going to take a mould of some sewing machines and make them lighter, so the Scottish girls in the Flying Dutchman could dance with them. So there's a buying element, a making element to the props, and we're also because my background is all in prop making is also in set. I also have background in set building. We also take on the responsibility of when you see larger large sculptural pieces, like large gorgeous sculpted cornicing, we'll do that as well. So our department's quite fluid, but there's a lot of responsibility.
Well, having seen quite a few productions now of different sizes and scales, and there's no two alike.
No.
So you're going fresh to a new project every time.
And it's a wonderful experience. I mean, I think there's a small number of us who go to we go to the first model showings, and we meet directly with the designer, and we look at the model box and we see what their vision is, and then we kind of enter this journey, which could be a year, it could be 18 months, or sometimes, depending on how busy the designer is, it might just be 6 months, but we have to go on this journey with them, and it somehow sounds a bit but enter into their mind to really understand their thinking so that we can produce it. And that's one of the best things about my job, is just building these great relationships with the designers, like people that when I was a prop maker in London, I used to look at them and go, oh, I'll never speak to that person, and now I have great working relationships where I help produce and get exactly what they want on the stage, and it's so satisfying, and as I've moved from a prop maker to the head of department, I think that's just a thing that I didn't know, an experience I didn't know would come to me, and I love it. It's fun.
So what other areas do you collaborate with? Do you collaborate with writers?
I mean, we have to kind of often talk with everybody. We'll sometimes, sometimes we do talk to the writers. That's quite rare.
Yeah.
we're very involved with the directors, sometimes even the music department, everybody who's in the rehearsal room, and certainly the props department. We will be collaborative with pretty much every other department, because more than any other department we've got so many crossovers. We might have a prop that needs to light up or has a special effect. We have a great design for next year's Gondoliers.
Right.
It's going to be a great collaboration between myself and the costume department. So we are collaborating all the time. We work very closely with the carpentry and the metalwork workshops and paint. So yeah, you have to make sure you get on well with everybody in this building.
So what was your first production, and what challenges did that offer you?
In Scottish
In
Opera.
Scottish Opera, yeah.
Gosh, I was working for years at Covent Garden, and I decided I wanted to come home, and so I sent my portfolio up here, and it was just as Pirates of Penzance was getting produced, and I came up I think the week before, and they said yeah, okay, lovely, bye bye, and then they said a week later when I was back down in London, please can you come up? And I was like, okay. So they booked me in for about 3 weeks, and it was the most incredible 3 weeks of huge amount of prop sculpting, making dead bodies, flying dead bodies, and it was a real change from working at places like Covent Garden where you have a lot of time because they have bigger budgets.
Yes.
And I remember, phoning up my parents going, oh my goodness, but it actually brought me alive again, because it gives you much more challenge. And I am actually really now excited by what our departments can do, the quality that our departments can produce in such small timescales. And I think that is one of the challenges, is you think you know what you're going to be making, and then once you get into the rehearsal room, about 100 new things come out, and then once you get into the theatre, it changes again. And we're just about to put Breaking the Waves into the theatre. We're literally got things on the wagon today, and they're going into the Theatre Royal. And I just said to my running props team, I just said, well done. It's been a tough one in the rehearsal room. You've been great, but I feel we're back down at ground zero again, and we're starting again when we go into the theatre. So every day is challenging, and everything generally you get asked to make is challenging because you'll have never been asked to make it before. So what are the differences between something like Pirates of Penzance, which has been put on, untold amount of times, and then you've got something like Breaking the Waves, which it's the first time that's been done as an opera? It's the second time. It's a European premiere.
Right.
Yeah.
So one, you've almost got a carte blanche to do something brand new with it, whereas do you feel that you have to at least look at other productions of something like Gilbert and Sullivan, or the other classics?
I mean, I think every designer will come to whatever project they're in saying, I'm going to do something completely different.
Yeah.
Even with the standards. I think the biggest difference that we have with the likes of Breaking the Waves, and with, say something like Tosca that's coming up, with our actual operas, normal established operas, we're working usually with teams who work in opera all the time. With Breaking the Waves, we're working with different creatives who are probably tend towards more theatrical.
Right.
And in the theatre, they tend to workshop things more in the room. And that's a bit of a challenge for us, because we have so many, different deadlines. We have certain deadlines where we have to have singers in costumes, or singers have so much to do on stage that they have to have their props ready. They can't have things thrown at them at the last minute.
Yeah, they can't be searching for something that has to be there.
Even since I started to study at the conservatoire, the expectations of an opera singer are so different. How much they're expected to act, and especially in the room in Breaking the Waves, I am blown away by what they're doing acting wise and everything, and the emotion coming out of that. So the last thing we can be doing is unsettle them.
Yeah, it's break them out of that performance.
But with this one, we probably will be, because it's very much a living, moving thing every single minute. It changes, and it'll probably be like that until it finally opens. And that's because they come from a theatrical background, and it's challenging. And at times you go, "Oh, I don't like this," but do you know, it's just because it's taking you out of your comfort zone, and it's probably producing some really brilliant art, I think, you know, with it. So.
And you mentioned the fabulous kind of Mechanical Man and Magic Flute.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite prop that you've worked on over the years? When you think, I absolutely got that.
People ask me that, and it's you kind of tend to love everything you make, but I do always hark back to the first job when I worked at the Royal Opera House, which had been my dream job, and I went in and I was given 2 jobs which were both hugely terrifying to me. And I remember sitting at my desk pretending I knew what I was doing, aware that everybody was looking at me not knowing what I was doing. And so I was asked to make, it was for Anna Nicole, the opera, right. And they had these camera masks, and they were full head masks. They were like retro movie cameras, and there would be dancers who were going to be wearing them, and they were dressed up like insects, and they were to look like the paparazzi. Right. So they were acting like kind of insects and creatures, but they had to be able to move their heads up and down.
So it's like a box camera, that kind
all
of thing,
different sorts of shapes.
Right. Okay.
And I was asked to make 8 at first, and then they liked them so much it went up to about 16. And it was a lot of challenges because dancers and singers don't like to have anything over their face. So I had to make that, and I also had to make a giant teapot for Alice in Wonderland, the ballet, for which the mouse would pop out of, like the dormouse would pop out of. So I had to make these 2 huge props at the same time, pretending that I knew what I was doing, and it was one of those real learning curves. But I love it now at Christmas when you see Alice in Wonderland on the ballet on television, and I can see my beautiful big teapot.
Excellent.
And then the reception that these beautiful masks got, you know, it was all worth it. But it was one of those moments where you go, "Oh, I hope I never have to do that again." But proud of those.
Do you have influences as someone who works in prop? Is there someone that you kind of go, "Yeah, I really like what they've done," and do you have your own style? With 2 questions here, but.
I often do wonder if I sometimes have my own style. I think I probably try to make things. Sometimes I used to get told by my old boss that I wasn't theatrical enough. I always like to make things too realistic.
Oh, right.
And that's a thing I've had to learn, is to make things a bit more dramatic, so that how they read on stage. But I think I'm just greatly influenced by the designers I work for. Yeah, right. The moment I'm working for them, my head is just in their art and trying to produce that. I mean, there's some fantastic, you know, prop makers who I've worked with who've taught me. I mean, and I'm very, very lucky. I've worked with Robert Alsop, who's, you know, thought of as a genius as a costume prop maker. And he's done some fantastic films and Doctor Who, and he's someone that designers just want to make their work. And I think it was working with him was the first time I ever felt like I was genuinely possibly a creative person myself and not just kidding myself on. And then working at the Opera House, just wonderful makers like Len Wheeler. So these aren't names that people would recognise, but in the industry, you know, I know how lucky I've been, you know. And
then talking about that, is there a kind of prop culture, or like people know each other, like the names
there's definitely there's a huge community, you know, and there's even an online community, and you know the evil Facebook, we use it quite a lot. Do you know where we could get this? Do you know if there's a maker here for that? And we do communicate, you know, and you know there's people, you know, you can talk to if you're stuck, because it's a difficult job at times, and sometimes you have to just reach out to, like, sometimes I've reached out to the head of English National Opera, who was somebody I worked for, and he's been fantastic, you know, coming up with ideas for things, and you know, and I phoned Russell Beck, who was one of the very first prop makers I worked for, and he is always trying to help. So there's a really good community, and I think everyone helps each other out, because it's a very stressful thing, because if you're asking for help, you're under a lot of stress, because if you don't have the thing on stage when they need it, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than sitting in an auditorium, the lights out, and everybody turns around to you and says you've not got this.
So you mentioned at the beginning how you came into this role almost like a circuitous route, going through academic work and then another, and going to the drama school. Is there now a more an easier way of people to get involved? Is there like
there's definitely an easier way to, there's much more awareness, I would say, about these courses existing. I don't think it's got any easier to get a job.
No.
I think it's still very much about putting your name out there, calling people up, showing your portfolio and grafting. And I think reliability is one of the hugest things in this job as well. Because, I remember being at the college and them telling us, you may think you're a great artist because you got in here, but actually anybody could learn this stuff. And it's more important to be the kind of person who work really, really hard. So I do try to say that without being patronising. It's just like, just graft and I'll give you the chance, because I'm not the greatest artist or prop maker by any means, and people gave me a chance because I would work hard, so that. And
are there particular productions that are coming up that you're looking forward to from your point of view that you can't wait to kind of show people your creation?
Yeah, well, I was actually just running down the corridor to come and meet you, and the deputy head of wardrobe came running up and going, "Oh, we have to talk about that thing in Gondoliers. We have to think." I have to say, Midsummer Night's Dream and Gondoliers are two big making shows for us this year. Midsummer Night's Dream, again, working with such an important designer, Tom Piper. One of these people you're thinking, wow, I'm going to get to work with him. He's come up with such a stunning design, and I am worried because there's bits of it already and I don't know how we're going to make this, but it's really, really challenging. Gondoliers with Dick Bird, who designed the Mikado, and just how visually stunning that was. We've got some fantastic things from that I can't really tell you because I don't want to.
No, that's fine. Just knowing that these are exciting you.
We are, and it's going to be quite fun going from Breaking the Waves, which is. I wouldn't say it's realistic, but it's very dark and it's not in any way a fantastical prop show, to once we've put this on, which we are excited about, but moving back into the workshop and be like, right, okay, it's now time to make some spectacular things with lots of colour and we are very excited.
It sounds like in a good way you can never rest because there's always the next thing. You see, you do a bit like putting on any production. It's done, it's gone. You think that was good fun, but now we're and it's like a blank canvas.
And even in the 6 years I've been here, Scottish Opera has got so busy. I mean, I first started, the summer was a bit quieter, and I thought, well, maybe this is a bit like, being a teacher. You get the summer to just kind of get everything back in order, but no, we don't do that now. And, and it's not even just the big shows. We have so many smaller shows, and we have, we've just done a wonderful education show, Fox Talk. So, we're always on it.
So what are the challenges with the different sizes of shows? Because obviously some will have fair sized budgets and others will be hardly.
I mean, with the main scale, you roughly kind of know the budgets for each, slot. Our final show tends to be, the big extravaganza at the end of the year. So we kind of can look at a show even sometimes without doing the costing up. We'll just look at the model box and go, that's not going to happen. And we do a lot of time, a lot of time is spent on the budgeting and the costing. But the big shows, I think we're we get there. The small shows have their own difficulty because, just from a design point of view, you always think a small show, will that be easier? But it's not, because it's often a show that tours and it has to fit into so many different venues. And there's
and be easily tourable as well.
And, and we don't, we're not sending a lot of people out the door with those shows. It could just be one or two people who have to build it and take it down under, a really, really tight schedule. So even the small shows can be hugely demanding, so we never rest that easy.
Well, I have to say, I always think that Scottish Opera sets in general are absolutely stunning, so it's an incredible team.
We are blessed with the most wonderful guys and guys and women in the workshops, and our painters are just very, very well known as well. Kelvin Guy, he's a bit of a legend. Yeah, we're very, very lucky with the craft in Scotland.
Just sort of one final question while it strikes me is, do you then come up with the drawings and plans and then go to people in the workshop, or are you actually making them yourselves these now?
No, so traditionally the designer would do the drawings.
Yeah.
A designer, depending how famous, big they are,
Yeah.
they could have assistants who will supply the drawings. But a lot of the time we employ a draftsperson
Right.
who, certainly for the workshops, for the actual set building, we really, really need the most precise technical drawings, and it saves a lot of problems to actually get a professional draftsman to do it. But costume, we'll get the most beautiful costume drawings. Props, we don't tend, unless it's a very specific prop, that's never been done before, we'll get about 1 million Googled images and an explanation, and then we try to make it from that. And that's what's important for us, is that's why we have to have that good relationship with the designer, because if you're given a mishmash of images, you somehow have to know you're going the right way with where their head's at. So.
Yeah, I've just got that scene in Spinal Tap where they order Stonehenge and it's in centimetres instead of metres.
Honestly, I have to face up, I just did a job for somebody and did something similar. So, it happens to everybody.
Well, Marion, thanks so much for talking to us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you.
And we'll be back soon with someone else from Scottish Opera. Cheers.